Hey guys, this is Jan for Chess24. Today we're gonna take a look at the game Vasil Ivanchuk against Wesley, so played in the 8th round of the Tata Steel Masters in Wijk aan Zee. It was a pretty curious game by itself, and it was also highly relevant for the tournament standings. If we take a look at them before the round, we see Ivanchuk is in the lead, shared with Magnus Carlsen on 5 out of 7, with Wesley so only half a point behind on 4.5 points. Vasil Ivanchuk, the Ukrainian, had a great tournament so far as the white pieces against Wesley, so who's had a very decent outing after a great year 2014 so far in this one as well. So let's jump into the game. Ivanchuk plays the move 1e4. Ivanchuk is famous for being able to play absolutely any opening there is, and it doesn't really make sense to prepare for him because you never know what he's going to do, if he's going to go e4, d4, c4, which line he's going to choose. So Wesley does stick to his guns and plays the opening he normally plays, the Spanish e5, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6. The main line he does not go for the Berlin, but plays the classical line with bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3. And to my delight, the move castles, the so-called martial attack, which I've been very fond of as well. Not going d6 yet, but keeping the options open to go d5, even at the cost of a pawn. The pure martial attack here is c3, d5, when white sometimes does not really feel like going for this. Theoretically, I believe black is doing fine, and it also leads to very concrete play, which is not to everyone's liking. So Ivanchuk plays the move h3, which is one of the principled anti-martials, one could call it. White hopes that black goes d6, when after c3 he would transpose back to a mainline Spanish, where white normally plays c3 and then h3 in the opposite order. But of course, a stubborn martial player does not want to enter that territory just yet, and to give the game its own course, you have to go bishop b7 here, still keeping the options open with the d-pawn. Now white plays a typical reaction to the move bishop b7, which is not c3. After c3, d5 would be extremely strong. But instead you go d3, trying to cripple that bishop on d7 a little bit with this pawn chain on e4 and d3. Now the interesting thing about this position is that for a long time it was assumed that black kind of has to play the move d6 here, leading to a quiet maneuvering game, which is very much alright for black. It's playable, but it leads to a typical Spanish where white is arguably slightly better, because black has weakened his queen side a little bit, and this knight on c6 is not ideally placed. Bishop on b7 is not ideal either. So you could make a case for white being a bit better here. But martial players, of course, want to play the move d5. This is the move played in the game. Had a bad reputation, but that has changed over the last couple of years. E takes d5, knight takes d5. And the first thing that has changed is that the move knight takes e5, which used to be considered to be very unpleasant here for black. And I've had my share of losses against this move. I once lost a crucial game in the World Cup against Ernesto Inarkiev after the move knight to d4, where I did not get enough compensation for the pawn. But things have changed, and nowadays knight takes e5, rook takes e5, queen d6, which I believe Kamsky introduced, is supposed to be pretty much alright for black. So instead white has preferred the more cunning move knight bd2 in this position. Here's where it really gets interesting. Vishy Anand played this move against Levon Aronian in the candidates in the year 2014. And Aronian in that game introduced the very interesting novelty queen to d7, which is also played in this game. Black just continues developing and leaves his pawn on e5 hanging, saying, I still don't believe you should take it. Before that, black was normally playing f6, defending this pawn, but slightly weakening this diagonal, or the move knight to f4, which looks nice and active, also indirectly defending the pawn. But I had the drawback that white goes knight to e4, followed by bishop takes f4. That's slightly unpleasant for black. So Wesley plays the move queen d7, no pun intended. And what happens is that Ivanchuk does take this pawn. This is the move Vishy played as well. However, theoreticians across the world have been well aware for quite a while that this is not a good line for black. And not a good line for white, excuse me. And we will see the reason shortly. Knight takes e5, rook takes e5. White is a pawn up. In the aforementioned game, Aronian played the move knight to f6 and went on to lose. He did not get quite enough compensation for his pawn, which I thought was one of the big turning points of 2014. This was the first round of the candidates. Had Aronian won that game, who knows if Vishy qualifies for another match with Magnus Carlsen if he makes his great comeback in the year 2014, while Aronian has not been in great shape ever since. And the reason that I believe there was a chance for Aronian to win this game is the move knight f4 in this position, which has been well publicized. Knight f4 leads to a terribly strong piece sacrifice on the next move. We will see it in a second. For now, the pawn on g2 is attacked and knight e4 might come to mind, but it doesn't really work because now the knight retreats to g6, attacking the rook on e5, which doesn't really have anywhere to go. It goes to h5, there's just bishop takes e4, and white can't recapture because his queen on d1 is on prise. Knight c5 also doesn't work, just in passing, because of queen c6, threatening mate, while the rook is still under attack. So you have to go knight to f3, interrupting this connection. And here, black has the very strong move, knight takes g2. A fantastic long-term sacrifice, which is just good for black. And this is no secret, as I mentioned. Anish Giri wrote it in his notes in New in Chess, which I read after that game, Anand against Aronian. I believe there were other sources mentioning it as well. Romain Edouard, the strong French grandmaster, gave it on his Facebook page, and it has been covered in other places. I was fortunate, and I thought I was surely the last one whom this would happen to get this move on the board. I had a tournament game in the German Bundesliga a couple months ago, 2-3 months ago, where I got this exact position against Grandmaster Nami Guliev. I was extremely happy to get it in. Knight takes g2. This is the kind of line you want to play, especially if you already know that it's good and you're not risking anything. Because white might have a narrow path to a draw here, but he can never be better, so this is just a situation you do not want to end up with under any circumstances if you're white. So king takes g2 is forced, and now let's see what the fuss is all about. Black has a very pretty move at his disposal. It's the move a5. Might not look like the end of the world, but it is a very cunning multi-purpose move. First of all, it threatens a4, winning this bishop. It wouldn't have anywhere to go. And if black would win the bishop, then material would be almost equal again, with the white king on g2 so exposed against the very active black pieces. White's task would just be hopeless. However, of course, there are ways for white to keep his bishop. c3, a4, c4, pretty much any move that creates space for it. When we see the other idea of the move a5, after let's say c3, it is the move rook to a6. The pawn created space on the a6 square. This rook swing is what it's really all about. It's horribly strong. Rook g6 is a threat. Rook f6 is a threat. Black is a whole piece down, but all his pieces operate at full capacity. Queen is looking at h3. This bishop will go here. The rook swings over. And it's just a horribly hard position for white to defend. I checked it in some more detail after my game against Guliev. I came to the conclusion that white probably has to go for this and here try the move d4, when he might survive, but that's really the best he can hope for. Rook g6 check, king h2. Black even has more than one option here. Rook f6 is interesting. Just briefly show you the line the computers give as white's best bet. Bishop to d6, pinning this rook, and now knight to h4. When black has a choice once again, but a4 is best. Knight takes g6, h takes g6. At the moment, black is a whole rook down, but it does not matter, because after, let's say, bishop c2, he would win his whole rook back with f6 and have an advantage. So the best white can do is try to bail out into an ending with queen g4, queen takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, king somewhere, bishop e5, d e5, and all of a sudden we would have an ending with equal material, which should end in a draw opposite colored bishops. However, this is a very computerish line, which is almost impossible to find for white over the board. There is also the chance that there are improvements from the black side. So bottom line is, it's a line you just don't want to get into as white at all. My game against Guliev, my opponent played the move a4, which is also quite logical, attacking b5 and creating a square for the bishop on a2, stopping black from going a4. But once again, after rook a6, the black attack is very, very strong. I did not manage to win this game. I came very close and I was quite happy with the game, but I missed a chance much later on. Let's jump to the position. Actually, I played quite well, at least, or I thought so, till many moves later. And in this position, I recaptured on h6, where I should have taken on a4 first, leading to a serious advantage. I'm not sure that was theoretically relevant, it just occurred to me. Still, king takes g2, a5, a4 or c3. c3 probably objectively best, but it's not a picnic. Ivanchuk plays another move, which is probably not a good move, but maybe he was also trying to get Wesley so out of book, because it's a horrible feeling. If you run into something like that, you think your opponent has prepared everything with a computer, and often you don't only look for the best move, but also for a move that makes sure you're playing against a human from now on, and not against the first line of a computer engine. So that might have been the thought behind rook takes e7. It gives back an exchange immediately before this bishop can activate itself and go to d6. Objectively, I don't think it's good. The remaining black pieces are still extremely strong. All the white problems remain, and black is not even a lot of material down anymore. But that's what he chose. Rook takes e7, queen takes e7, now c3. Of course, so once again goes for this idea with rook to a6, intending rook g6 or rook f6. And Ivanchuk plays d4, hoping that he can block the diagonal with a move d5 should he need to. So now plays the move rook f6, which according to my computer at least is not the best choice here. It's very strong as well and leaves black with an advantage. But even stronger was probably the move rook g6 check, king f1. No other squares are any good either. And queen to d7, a very typical idea. This queen sidesteps to target the pawn on h3, and turns out there's no real defense for white at all. Let's say knight g1. Black just plays rook e8, and we see all the black pieces are just so well placed. Bishop g2, checkmate is threatened. And after, let's say, f3, there is no way white will survive for a long time. Black can already go rook g1, king g1, queen takes h3, and black is just too active. This game would end with mate shortly. So did not go for rook g6. Instead he went rook f6. He had another idea in mind. He wants to provoke d5 and now attack this pawn, win it, and then win with a pin on this long diagonal. Plays a4, chasing the bishop to c2, and rook d8. This was his idea, attacking the pawn on d5. Black is not worried to have all his heavy pieces lined up on this diagonal. It might look at first sight like white can win even more material with bishop g5, but that does not really work for him. Once again, the tactics are on black side here. Rook takes d5, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, queen to e2, threatening checkmate on e8, but black has yet another very cute move. Move rook to e5. Exploiting that white can't take here because black would just take back and this knight is pinned. Stopping the mate on e8. Now if the queen goes somewhere, queen d3 let's say, this bishop has been freed and can just take on f3 when the final nail in the coffin is after queen f3. There is rook g5 check, separating the king from his queen, and black wins. So you can't go bishop g5. there is not that much you can do. Ivanchuk finds the best chance to move queen e1, offering an exchange of queens, which of course is nothing black wants. So goes to d7. Queen d6 was a bit more precise, with the same idea of keeping the queens on the board, but controlling the h2 square, because in the game White had a chance to at least stick around after queen d7. Should have gone queen to e4, threatening queen takes h7 check, rook g6 check, and now king h2. This is the difference. This would not have been possible with a queen on d6. And it's not that clear. Bishop takes d5, queen to f5, or even queen f4. Let's say queen f5, this looks more natural. White seems to manage to bail out into an ending where he's worse, but it's not hopeless. Something like this. Black is a pawn up, but there is opposite color bishops on the board, and White should have some drawing chances here. Say bishop e3, not that clear. This was that easy for Black to do. However, all of this is much easier said than done with a computer engine than while you're sitting on the board defending against all these very active black pieces. And Ivanchuk went for the move knight g5, which just does not work. It's a logical idea as well. He wants to get this knight out of the diagonal before it ends up in this deadly pin. But so just powers through now with a very precise sequence. Plays h6, chases the knight away. Knight has to go to e4, rook g6 check. The king has to go to h2. It has to keep an eye on the h3 pawn, which was attacked by the black queen. So it goes to h2, and here the problem is there is the move f5, attacking the knight yet again. And it doesn't have anywhere good to go. Would like to go to c5, but then there is queen d6 check, attacking the king and the knight, winning on the spot. So the knight has to go to the more humble square g3, but trouble comes on this diagonal now. Queen takes d5. See, it's quite useful for black to have the pawn on a4, else bishop b3 would win the queen. Not the case. Queen g2 check is a threat, which is not easy to parry without losing a lot of material. Ivanchuk goes queen to g1, queen to f1 would not have been any better. Black can just go queen f3, as we will see in the game, and would win. Queen to g1, and now there's a couple of ways to finish the game. So plays the move queen f3, which is very strong and wins. To please the fans, rook takes g3. I find even more pretty with the idea f takes g3, queen d2 check, a queen sacrifice, exploiting the white king is kind of trapped by his own queen. Bishop d2, rook takes d2, and black picks up a lot of material, leads to a winning ending. Let's say this takes, and all of a sudden black is a piece up after starting a piece down with his piece sacrifice. So that would have been the cutest finish, but queen f3 does the job. Once again, it's threatening rook takes g3, which wins, and if white goes bishop e3, which looks like the only move, there is a queen sacrifice yet again. Queen takes e3, f takes e3, rook d2 check, and we have the same scenario that the white king is deprived of an escape square by his own queen, and white would lose all his material pretty much. That's why Ivanchuk decided that he had seen enough after queen to f3. Here we barely see him. He's sitting at the board. Of course, he knew he was lost for quite a while. Wesley So is standing in the background looking at other games, and Ivanchuk keeps weighing his options. I believe now he comes to the realization it's hopeless. He waves, so Wesley So comes to the board and they shake hands. Wesley So wins this game with the black pieces against Vasil Ivanchuk. Pretty much a nightmare scenario to run into a prepared line like this. Knight f4, knight f3, knight takes g2, king takes g2, a5. Your opponent knows everything. And it also is objectively good, which your opponent also knows. Now, of course, one has to criticize that this idea was well publicized, as mentioned, and it was played by yours truly. I also made a couple of videos on this very Chess24 channel pointing out the idea and speculating what would have happened had Levan Aronian played this against Anand back in 2014. So just a very unfortunate spot for Vasil Ivanchuk, who was not well prepared for this particular line. And a very easy win for Wesley So, who keeps climbing up the standings, is now on 5.5 out of 8 and passes Vasil Ivanchuk. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I will see you on Chess24 or on this channel soon. Bye, thank you.